What's up, it's your boy Hobo Drobo. Today, we're finally going to be talking about Aegion Brightsteel, the first original character to Kingdom Rush battles. And even if you're not a fan of Aegion, you may want to stick around. We're going to be talking about a lot of stuff here, and at the very end of the video, I'm going to be replaying that clip from my last video, where I was basically using the exact same strategy, but with Beresad. And when you have Beresad, it's a lot easier to transition from the Teslas to the Rocket Gunners in that boss wave, being able to take down bosses pretty effectively. This deck I'm using here can basically be used with any hero, so you could plug in Magnus, you could plug in Allura, you could even plug in some other melee heroes like Hacksaw, really anything that you have. I just think this tower combination with the spells is very strong right now, although specifically for Aegion and melee heroes I really like to use Tesla. You may be able to get away with something else. And even in this deck I'm using the Necromancer, but I end up selling the Necromancer and he does nothing for this deck. That tower spot could be replaced with anything. Sometimes I'm using the Battle Mecha. Basically just trying out different passives, because for the most part, this deck is Glacial Druid, Tesla, and the Rocket Gunners. That's basically all you need with Aegion, and so for the most part, I like to keep the Battle Mecha in my deck just because you get that extra passive boost of an extra 2% armor, and then an extra 3% decrease in enemies' physical armor. When you have that armor buff on your own troops, between the 1% from Aegion and the 2% from the Rocket Gunners, you're getting Aegion up to 85% armor, and that's crazy for face tanking things like Call the Dragon, as you can see here. Aegion is really good at what he excels in just by being a stalling troop. Now, this is really difficult as well because once you get to waves 4 and 5, it becomes really hard to defend on some specific maps, and we'll look at some cases where I end up just getting rolled right after this match. The only thing that I feel like I'm struggling with Aegion is that he's only very good on some specific maps, and so the Silver Oak maps here are his bread and butter. You're going to see that I actually think Aegion is better than Icecalt on this map. It could just be because of how my opponent was playing it, but naturally it's so much more difficult for this Icecalt player to take out the Call of the Dragon compared to Aegion that I'm just playing into the strengths of what boosters are going on here. And I also did my best to not use Archmage in this deck, although like I said, there's that one tower spot where you could basically put anything there, and so if I wanted to get really jiggy with it, I could end up just putting Archmage instead of Necromancer, and I think on some maps where I'm struggling, that's the missing piece. But I really wanted to try and use Aegion without Archmage because I just feel like Archmage is such a bailout card right now that it doesn't even matter. At that point, I'm showing off Dissipate more than Aegion, and I really wanted to see if Aegion could tank things, maybe even go up against some Archmage Dissipate players, and put out the necessary damage by being able to stall. The thing about the Archmage that I don't think enough people are talking about is that it's really difficult at those higher levels to be able to use effectively, because once your opponent has tower levels that can take out the troops that get dissipated, all of a sudden you're just feeding your opponent free gold, and you end up falling behind a lot. I'll show a match where my opponent was rushing Dissipate, and they ended up not being able to actually defend after those Dissipates were going off, and I got a sneaky win out of it with Aegion, even though I probably wouldn't have been able to defend myself. That's sometimes just how you have to scrap by with these wins. I wasn't able to get to a boss round, unfortunately, and that's just the difficult part with it. Aegion struggles and he doesn't get enough value for you to even be able to switch from those Teslas to the Rocket Gunners in those later boss stages, but I was really close in one of the Bandit Lair maps, so I will show that off. And it's also important to keep in mind that the cards in my deck are usually 1 to 2 levels above my opponent in most of these matches, so you can be the judge of how you feel about that. I do think Aegion is one of the better heroes in Stadium right now, just because that armor helps so much from being able to tank and not go down right away. And so that's why in most cases I actually think it's better to take damage spells than stalling spells, but in Stadium I just don't have high enough level cards to really be able to justify it. I do end up getting more damage just by stalling things out, but in custom matches, it's a lot easier to pull that off. Praha and I did some custom matches recently, and he used the damage spells to be able to clear everything, and then allowed the Rocket Gunners to do a crazy amount of damage on the boss. We'll have a video dropping tomorrow on that, with a collab talking a lot about battles in general. Check that out when it drops. For the rest of this match, I'll just be going into how I like to set up for the early game, and then for the other matches, I'll explain what either went right or what went wrong, and then I'll have timestamps in the description if you just want to check those out, with quick summaries. And so whether you're setting up with Aegion or another hero like Beresad or Magnus to prioritize damage, you're going to want to focus on the towers that your hero struggles with. So with Aegion, I'm basically just spamming Tesla all over the map. I do like having Rocket Gunners up early on this map because they do get value taking out that Call of the Dragon, but in most cases I'm usually not getting my Rocket Gunners up until wave 3 or 4, and then I'm definitely not getting them maxed until wave 5 or 6. It's really difficult to get them up and get value out of them. I need to have the consistent value of the Tesla taking out enemies to be able to even survive until those late rounds. Well, with Beresad does a lot of AoE, so sometimes he struggles with the flying troops. In that case, I'll rush the rocket gunners early, and I won't really focus on the Tesla or the other towers like the Sorcerer. In this match, I decided to swap the Sorcerer for the Glacial Druid to see if that extra stalling potential could help, as well as doing a little bit of extra magic damage, but for most maps I do like to use the Sorcerer instead, but it really depends on the map, and that's why I want to bring it up again. Being able to swap your deck after seeing what map there is, I think could be a really good option for Stadium. It would allow you to then have multiple decks set up to prepare yourself better, and it would help eliminate that feel of RNG that I think a lot of people are feeling in Stadium right now. Again, that's why I like Onslaught, because you can prepare your deck for that map all day. And that's also why I have like roughly a 50% win percentage with Aegion, because there are some maps where he really does excel, and then there are some maps where you're just going to struggle, and depending on what boosters you get, it can make it even more difficult. Silver Oak is really his bread and butter. He's just so good at dealing with all the different types of boosters that come on these maps, being able to stall the ground stuff and then tank for those Call of the Dragons. Very nice, and I didn't find any problems going up against even players with Ice Scouts or Beresads. Even some Archmage players I was actually keeping up. But Aegion is by no means a hero that you should be picking if you're trying to get a high win percentage. I'm just doing this because I wanted to have fun. I was able to use this deck with Beresad, and I went 5-0 with Beresad, and it didn't even feel like a challenge whatsoever. And I even played multiple Archmage players who were spamming Dissipate. It was light work dealing with them, and I'll highlight that again at the end of this video. Now the Necromancer, I thought maybe I could help swarm my opponent if I got it in the right spot, because Aegion is really good at holding those choke points. But right now, I just feel like there wasn't a good spot to put it. Maybe on that right side where that Glacial Druid was, but I figured the stalling potential was going to be a lot better. And to make Aegion work at all, you really have to be careful about what towers you're placing down. Tesla is going to be your best friend, and I think that it's probably going to replace the Dwarven Artillery as the S-tier artillery. And I also think that the Royal Archers are a lot better because they help deal with that extra damage towards flying enemies, dealing with golems and stuff like that. Huge, and I love having that as an extra tower. I would even replace the Glacial Druid and the Necromancer for Royal Archers and Sorcerer. That's basically my main deck. And whenever I go into Stadium with Beresad, that's the lineup. Sorcerer, Royal Archers, Rocket Gunners, Tesla. And you could throw Battle Mecha in there, but I don't think I really need it. The only problem I'm having with Battle Mecha right now is that it's not too high level, so I can't rely on it as a win condition, and also it doesn't protect my Rocket Gunners from going down to things like Sniper Shots or Tesla Stun. The Rocket Gunner's Sting Missile is my win condition once I get to the boss round, so if I'm not able to have them up, then it's basically GG's. But if for some reason I'm actually able to get to the boss round, I'm able to do all the clearing I need with the Tesla before the boss gets too far, then I can swap all my Teslas to Rocket Gunners for the Sting Missile, and they take out the boss right away. With Aegion, it's just not really possible because you don't get enough value out of him, but with Beresad, it's very possible, and it's almost the best strategy in the game right now. Combine that method with something like the Blazing Gem and Sabotage, and all of a sudden you can take down bosses really, really fast. I'll try to get more meta stuff going, but again, I do have that clip at the end of this video showing exactly how you can use those Rocket Gunners with almost a perfect transition from Tesla to the Sting Missiles. I think I executed it pretty well, so check that out. The only thing I'm seeing the Rocket Gunners really struggle with right now is those early to mid waves. Compared to the Barbarians, they just can't keep up, and it's really difficult for me to put the Rocket Gunners over the Barbarians, for example. I'm not sure which one of those towers are better. I think they both have their place, and I think that they both require a certain level of execution to actually be used properly. The Barbarians, I think you even need to micro more than the Rocket Gunners, believe it or not, and I think that that's mainly because dealing with Thunderbirds can be really difficult, making sure they don't get stunned by them. And then with the Rocket Gunners, I think it's more your macro strategy. Being able to prepare well enough to be able to transition from the Teslas to those Sting Missiles is not easy, and sometimes you don't have the economy to actually be able to pull it off if you don't have a hero like Beresad. And so even in this match, you can see we did make it to the boss wave, and I'm starting to transition into more Rocket Gunners. However, there's still so many troops I have to deal with that they can't really start getting damage on the boss. And this is where Aegion just doesn't get enough value, unfortunately. And this is where I really just need that quick burst damage from Rain of Fire and Lightning, and then maybe even Sabotage on top of that. I just need the stalling, unfortunately, here, because if I don't have it, then the boss is just going to walk right through. That's another thing that I'm having a hard time balancing. Having enough stalling, but then also having enough damage to clear stuff for the boss. It's not easy, and I do think I would have had enough time to actually stall out that boss and get the Sting Missiles to kill it, But you can see here that I didn't even have to do that because the Call of the Dragon went right through that Ice Sculpt, and I was able to play to my advantage with Aegion. And that's a lot of what you're going to run into in these stadium matches. A lot of it is just going to be matchup dependent, and so when you get those matchups, you have to make sure that you execute properly. And so this is just another match on the same map, showcasing how Ice Sculpt just gets cooked by Call of the Dragon. I was also able to back them up with a Shaman in round 2. There's just nothing they can do here, and my Aegion does so much of a better job of dealing with the boosters here that I'm able to get a lot of these wins in the early rounds. Again, I wasn't able to kill a boss with Aegion yet. I'm getting really close, and we'll show that. But for the majority of the time, if you're going to win with Aegion, it's going to be in these early rounds, even sometimes being a blitz like we see here. I don't think that the battle mecha was the right play here though from my opponent. Anything that could have helped with that Call of the Dragon would have been better, and that's another example of picking one tower wrong in those early rounds will really cost you. And so now let's look at it from the other point of view, where I'm often running into these matches where there's almost nothing I can do, getting rolled by archmage players, level 15 Beresad here, and somehow I was even able to keep up until wave 4. Not exactly sure how I was able to pull that off, but we'll take it. And you can see here the Tesla spam is good up until wave 4, but then once you get to wave 4 and 5, you really need something else to just put it over the edge. Something like the Glacial Druid that can help slow things down and deal a little bit more penetration towards normal physical armor is really nice. That's something that I should have done here. And I figured let's just try the Teslas and see how much that shock ability can really hack away at the enemy's health. Unfortunately here it just wasn't enough. But still, being able to keep up with somebody with the same level cards, and then their Beresad is level 15 compared to my level 9 Aegion, definitely impressive for me here. And I do think that if I had switched some things up, maybe even have Archmage in my deck, Archmage could all of a sudden push this strategy from just being a troll deck where I win 50% of the time to then winning up to 80%, 90% of my matches. Let me know if that's something you guys want me to try. I just feel disgusting using Archmage, but I think that if I'm using something like Aegion, maybe it's a little bit more reasonable, but I do think I lose a lot of aura when I'm using the Archmage. Now let's look at one more loss before we get into the other 2 win matches. This match right here, I was actually able to get to the boss round surprisingly, but I wasn't able to take it out. I just couldn't get enough AoE clearage to feel comfortable enough swapping over the rocket gunners to the sting missiles, and by the time I did feel comfortable, the boss was just so far. And one thing people don't really mention about the Blizzard is that it doesn't only block your tower from being able to attack, but it also blocks you from being able to upgrade or sell it. And so having to manage all the things on the board as well as paying attention to when I could sell and buy the towers, I just couldn't keep up with it. I'm sure over time I'll get better, but getting this far on a map with Aegion was actually pretty exciting and I did not expect it. And I think that if I do refine my strategy a little bit, I will get better. It's just so difficult because it's so rare that I even get to these positions to begin with, that if I mess up, it's like, okay, I blew the opportunity. However, it also has given me another goal. I feel like I can strive to try and now beat bosses with Aegion, even if it's really difficult, and even if it's not necessarily something where I'm going to be winning a lot, just the satisfaction of being able to take out a boss with Aegion would be awesome. As you guys know, I'm not taking things too seriously from a competitive perspective. I really tried to hone in on that and be serious when it came to my tier list, but overall I think that's also why I didn't really enjoy making that video, because doing stuff like this is a lot more fun. Progression issues aside and my ranting aside, I do like how that tier list video came out, and I appreciate the feedback that I got from it as well. Clearly you guys want to see more of that, and so I will continue to try and push that out. The next thing I want to get up is that booster tier list, which I'm behind on. And so this match against Ashbite is a perfect example of how RNG can sometimes go in your favor. For example, I was able to get the stone golems on wave 3, and they were definitely able to take it out if they had replaced those musketeers with more necromancers, but the Ashbite just wasn't prepared for that, and he took the risk going for the musketeer sniper shots, I imagine, or maybe the shrapnel shot. Whatever it wasn't the right play, and those golems get through and end up getting me a win in wave 3, which is how I get a lot of these blitzes going. The nice thing about being an experienced player is that once you understand what boosters are on which maps, how to counter them, and what towers to place where, it becomes a lot easier to use heroes like Aegion because you're not relying on them to take care of the boosters. Which is why it's really important to hold on to gold at the end of rounds. If you're not paying attention to what boosters are being sent in the beginning of those rounds, and you make one wrong mistake with a wrong upgrade, it could cost you the match. Especially with heroes like Aegion, where you really need to be precise with your macro, almost more than your micro. Macro strategy is what you're planning from waves 1 to 6, and that will fluctuate depending on what boosters are sent, and then your micro strategy is how you're moving your hero around, and then doing small things like I consider buying a skill to be able to be timed up perfectly when you need it to be. For example, if you have a Beresad that's really low health, buying sniper shots at the right moment to take him out, that's micro as well. And so this is another match that I wanted to highlight against an archmage player. They didn't have any artillery to support the archmage, and so even though they were able to dissipate a few things, it didn't matter because the broodmother just did so much to be able to push through, and then at the end, the broodmother ends up cracking the egg after it dies. He was not prepared for it, and all those spiders go through. This is why it's not just dissipate to win. Archmage players need to be very careful with when and how they're using that ability, so don't always give up right when you see an archmage. There's always a chance to win like you saw there. Now what you guys have been waiting for. If you didn't see my video from yesterday, this is the same clip, but it was basically after I had played Prahant and not using an artillery, I figured I needed to change something up, swap in the Tesla like he had recommended, and it worked perfectly. When you're using Aegion, all of a sudden the Tesla's ability to be able to hit air increases significantly. Aegion is nowhere near as good as Beresad, and so once I swapped in Beresad with the same strategy, it was so much better. All of his AoE damage, as well as getting the extra gold from death tax, as well as the stalling potential, just completely outclasses Aegion, unfortunately. The one thing I will say is that Aegion is a lot better at dealing with Call of the Dragons, like we saw in those earlier matches, but if you're able to separate the Call of the Dragons or Thunderbirds from ground troops using Icy Zone or Stun, you're able to then put up Royal Archers, and the Royal Archers dealing bonus damage to air troops should not be underestimated. It is so good, and I still really like the Royal Archers as an option right now. And so like I said yesterday, this clip does a pretty good job of showing how you can transition from Teslas to taking out the mobs, to then buying the gunners with the Sting missiles, taking out the boss. It's really nice, it's really fun to play, and I think that you could also easily swap out some of the towers here, maybe replace the Royal Archers for something else, the Sorcerer for something else, get a crazy cool win condition going. You could easily throw Archmage in this deck. I mean, Archmage is basically just plug and play with any deck because of how strong it is. But I do like trying to get new synergies going because I want the eventual goal to be that when players are dissipating things to my side, I take them out instantly, and I actually have an advantage because I'm able to get more gold. I just don't think we're quite there yet, but over time, it's going to get better. So for the rest of this clip, just pay attention to how I'm transitioning from those Teslas to the Sting missiles to be able to do that boss damage. I think that this is how a lot of people are using the rocket gunners right now, and it's easily the most effective way to use them. They're not really good in those earlier rounds, but being a boss killer is really fun, and they do have their weaknesses, so I think overall it's a pretty balanced tower. Let me know what you guys think. Stay tuned to that collab video with Prahant tomorrow. I'm really excited to see what people think about that, and I'm really excited for more collabs in the future. It was awesome to be able to talk through things, give our ideas, and being Kingdom Rush veterans, it was cool to see what Prahant wanted added to this game. So I'll let this clip play out again. Until next time, good luck in your next battles, and I'll catch you in the next one. Peace out.